Welcome to the Personal Independence Payment Change of Circumstances and Inquiry line for Northern Ireland residents. Calls to this line are free. If you wish to make a new claim, you will need to call 0800 012 1573. Your call may be recorded for legal, security and training purposes. Please hold while we connect you to someone who can help you.
This is a story about disability benefits in the UK. A while ago, I got a brown envelope through the door telling me that although I had a full year of benefits left before my award is up, I have to submit a reassessment form within 2 weeks, otherwise I'll lose my benefits. This is something that tens of thousands of people around the country go through each month, so this is a topic that's pretty close to home. Disability benefits in the UK have changed a lot in the past 10 years. I'm only going to be talking about a specific type of disability benefit today and on its impact on a specific group of disabled people, but I encourage you to listen to more disabled people about this. Disabled writers, academics and creators have been talking about these issues since before they were introduced. Personal Independence Payment, or PIP, is a disability benefit that I receive. It can be awarded regardless of how much you earn, and in theory at least, isn't connected with whether you work or not. It's intended to help with the additional costs of living that come with being disabled, which for the average disabled person in the UK come to £6,840 per year. But notably, it usually doesn't meet these costs. PIP was introduced over the last few years, ostensibly to make disability benefits more fit for purpose and to direct more support to people who really needed it. Before PIP was introduced, people could be awarded DLA, or Disability Living Allowance, for life if they had a disability or health condition that was unlikely to change in future. Awards relied heavily on what your own doctor said, which had upsides and downsides, but it meant that opinions from healthcare professionals that knew you best were weighted heavily, which was often advantageous. With PIP, lifetime awards have disappeared, and even disabled people with static disabilities like amputees and some people with spinal cord injuries have to go for regular reassessments, potentially every few years. This is for the reasonable purpose of ensuring that they haven't grown back their leg like a starfish, which may negate their need for the benefit. Gone too has a reliance on your own doctors for medical opinions. In-person assessments are now carried out by HCPs, healthcare professionals, who may or may not have experience of or even basic knowledge about your disability, and their reports are based strictly on a criteria that assess how well you can function in your day-to-day life. To summarise, instead of being awarded PIP because you have a certain health condition or you're understood to have a certain disability, you're awarded PIP because you specifically need help doing things like eating or drinking, getting dressed, using the bathroom or walking around. PIP is split up into two components: the daily living component, which is awarded mostly based on the level of support you need to do day-to-day activities at home, and the mobility component, which is how easily you can plan and undertake journeys, walk or otherwise travel. I, for example, get the higher level of the mobility component, but absolutely nothing from the daily living component, despite having significant difficulties with both areas. But interestingly, this decade has seen an incredible level of privatisation in the disability benefit system, and today a few people are making an absolute killing out of PIP. In-person assessments for PIP are carried out not by the National Health Service or by the government departments responsible for benefits, but by massive private companies who are contracted to do so. In Northern Ireland, that contract went to Capita plc, a multinational outsourcing and financial organisation. Other companies hold and have held contracts across the rest of the UK. Between 2013 and 16, more than £500 million of public money was paid to these contracted businesses to provide assessments for disabled people accessing benefits. Now, you may argue that outsourcing to a private company isn't inherently a problem if they're assessing people fairly and writing fair reports. The problem is, though, that of 670,000 people who were denied PIP, who then challenged the decision, 18% won at the initial challenge stage, called a mandatory reconsideration. For those who continued to formal appeal through a tribunal, 63% won their appeals. That's 227,000 people who secured their benefits after initially being denied. That's ludicrous. That's the size of a reasonable city here in the UK. This would suggest that Capita's assessments and those done by the other contractors are perhaps not up to scratch. To add insult to injury, the guidelines for PIP reports are so vague that a report deemed acceptable can be riddled with errors and omissions, according to the UK Parliament's own Work and Pensions Select Committee. I saw that in my own PIP report, where there were several things left out and many complete falsehoods. I even changed gender 3 times in less than 1,000 words. On top of that, all 3 contractors have come under questioning by the Select Committee as to why they all incentivise their assessment staff with financial bonuses for each day they process a certain level of extra assessments. This has led to disabled people receiving reports that are rushed, inaccurate and completely inappropriate. Reports generated based on copy-pasted text are common, and these reports often form the basis for benefits denials. For example, Work and Pensions Select Committee Chairperson Frank Field MP said,
"All 3 contractors insist that offering their assessors extra cash to complete more assessments each day has in no way compromised the service that claimants receive. But we have received thousands of accounts of shoddy, error-ridden reports that have slipped through the net. A claimant whose PIP report stated she walked her dog daily, despite not being able to walk nor owning a dog, is a case in point."
In 2017, England-based support organisation Here to Support said that 2/3 of PIP appeals that their clients had won involved lying assessors, and larger investigations by Disability News Service found experiences of lying healthcare professionals were endemic. That's a lot of lying assessors. I think we may be dealing with something that isn't isolated, perhaps more of a systemic problem. The PIP assessment goes deep into our struggles and difficulties as disabled people. Although I'd helped friends fill out the forms plenty of times before, when it became my turn, I was suddenly taken aback by how many difficulties I had. We're forced to reveal very intimate details about ourselves, about how we eat, what we do in our own homes, how we use the bathroom, and often about the pain and suffering that we have to deal with. And all this to someone we may never meet or even speak to, who makes judgments about us without ever hearing our stories beyond whether we can pick up cutlery or not. All for benefits which don't often meet the basic costs of being disabled. And when I say basic costs, I mean the basic costs. 1 in 5 disabled adults in the UK is unable to keep their homes warm, and over a quarter have less than £50 each week to live on after housing costs and tax. The United Kingdom signed the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2007 and ratified it in 2009. The convention for many represented a sea change in the philosophy of disability rights at UN level. But unfortunately, during and after the ratification process, the human and civil rights of disabled people in the UK were being dismantled. The disability benefit system in this country has become crueler and more unforgiving, meaning disabled people's experiences of declining health and poverty are often the direct result of delay or denial of disability benefits payments. The United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities reviewed the UK in 2016, describing government benefits cuts as having created a human catastrophe for disabled people in the country. The committee had previously said that the benefits cuts had caused grave and systematic violations of disabled people's rights. The government fought this in court but ultimately lost, and the committee have made dozens of recommendations to the UK government on the treatment of disabled people in the country, none of which have been fulfilled as of today. The UK government often waxes lyrical about how much it's spending on benefits for disabled people.
The overall funding for disability benefits will be higher in every year up to 2020 than it was in 2010. We have been focusing support on those who most need it, those who are not able to get into the workplace. For those who are able at some stage to get into the workplace, we've been providing a wider package of support, and I'm pleased to say that over the last 3 years, nearly 600,000 more disabled people are now in the workplace with the dignity of having a job, which is what many people with disabilities want to have.
What the UK government says about disabled people and what it does, though, are very different things. While praising themselves about how many disabled people have entered work and how the people who need it most receive more support today, government ministers have been repeatedly accused of using disability statistics in misleading ways. And Sarah Newton MP, the Tory Minister for Disabled People at the time, refused to apologise for misleading Parliament about a report on extreme poverty last year. I've been using mobility aids for a few years now, and I have a lovely set of bright orange crutches and a bright orange wheelchair to get me through the world. I've been claiming personal independence payment for around 2.5 years. The first assessment I had in 2017 was horrendously difficult, exhausting and drawn out, and was especially scary as I was on a very low income at the time. Although my assessor was nice to my face, she lied throughout her report. From making things up completely, to facts being misrepresented or twisted, to obvious lorem ipsum boilerplate throughout, her report was ultimately used to grant me 0 points for both components of PIP. There's some absolutely stunning phrases in this report. I'll give you the highlights. I've uploaded my full report to Twitter, should you fancy having a longer laugh yourself. You were observed to walk approximately 1 metre unaided with a normal gait and at a normal pace. 1 metre is about 2 steps for those playing along at home. The report continues, I have decided you can stand and then move for more than 200 metres safely and reliably and for most of the time. The assessor within 30 minutes had concluded the opposite of what every healthcare provider I've talked to in the last 3 years has said, which I think is referred to as innovation. Another one, you were able to go from standing to sitting in one fluid movement. And that, my friends, is a very verbose way of saying fell into a chair. Due to the report and the decisions taken by the government department, I was ultimately denied any PIP whatsoever. I eventually fought that and through the initial challenge process and got what I now receive, the Enhanced Mobility Award and no daily living. However, like many disabled people, my health is changeable, as is my mobility. And perceptions of disability in society and perceptions of who deserves and who does not deserve help impact on disabled people and our disability assessments too. That was 2 years ago, and well, now it's time for all of that all over again. This is my car. It's a 2018 Hyundai Ioniq, and it's leased through the Motability scheme, which is probably the one part of disability benefits in the UK that I really like. You swap part or all of your mobility component of PIP for a lease of a car that covers everything except fuel. Tax, insurance, repairs, roadside recovery, it's all covered. I wish it applied to more things like electric bicycles, but it's a great scheme and it's changed my life for the better. I got this car in February 2018, so I've had it for about 20 months now, and I've put about 28,000 miles on the clock. It's opened so much of Ireland and the world to me. As someone who's politically against the mass use of cars within cities, it's an uncomfortable reality that it's the most accessible way for me to get around over longer distances, but I'm working on that. It's got strong heated seats which help with my severe back pain. It's got self-driving technology which helps me keep a little bit safer, and it can carry both my chair and crutches while also carrying other passengers. I got this car because of how my disability affects me, and I am going somewhere with this. Now, this is the part where any of you who work in the UK government's benefits departments should skip. Go take a walk, steal from a food bank, kick a poor person, whatever strikes your fancy. So here's the thing. If you spend less time waiting at cold bus stops, you may find that your pain is better at the end of the day. If you spend less time walking back from those bus stops, you may find that your fatigue is better too. If you have a car at your disposal, a tool provided literally to benefit your mobility, you may find your mobility improves. So how does that affect your access to benefits? What would a sensible government department do if your mobility or health improves slightly due to a tool provided by that department? Well, in the case of the clever boys at PIP, they do the most reasonable thing. They take the car away. Seriously, between 2013 and 2017, over 50,000 people have had their Motability cars and wheelchair accessible vehicles taken away from them due to cuts and reassessments. And Motability isn't just for vehicles. You can also get electric wheelchairs through the scheme, and thousands of disabled people have literally had their wheelchairs confiscated because of often minor improvements in their health. Personal independence payment, taking away personal independence. Seems like a misnomer, surely. As a wheelchair user, I feel fairly confident in saying that they benefit mobility and they open up so much of the world to us and give us access to so much. The hashtag #WheelchairsAreFreedom on Twitter will give you a brief insight to the wonderful liberty that chairs bring to many. They also personally benefit my health Taking mine away would be a great way to decimate my health again, especially with the amount of travel that I do internationally, and bring it back to where I was regularly housebound for days, most weeks. Often, the adaptations and equipment that we have are a delicate interdependent system, and literally fucking confiscating a major part of that system rarely does disabled people or public funds much good. I went to IKEA last week to pick up a few things for the office where I'm currently filming. IKEA is huge. There's no way I could walk that whole distance. So I use my wheelchair, as I do in all big shops, at all airports, and when abroad. Disability benefits in the UK behave like if I can get around IKEA with a wheelchair, the obvious thing to do is to take that chair away. Hopefully I don't need to explain why that's ass backwards. It's no secret that disabled people experience an intense level of public scrutiny in our day-to-day life. Whether it's tales of benefit scroungers or lazy people faking a limp to get a free wheelchair ride at the airport, our society is filled with people willing to cross-examine disabled strangers as they go about their lives. There's a perception, especially where I'm from here in Northern Ireland, that countless thousands of people are playing the system to get access to disability benefits that they're not entitled to, to swan around in their ill-gotten DLA cars. This leads to a culture of suspicion, but it specifically affects disabled people's behaviour and freedom too. It's very difficult to hold PIP assessors to account for their behaviour. As we've learned today, there's plenty of reasons why someone may want to record their PIP assessment to prove that things in a report are incorrect, or to pursue complaints against assessors. However, disabled people have to individually request permission to record their assessment in advance of the appointment, and assessors can turn this down without reason and often do without notice. To be allowed to record, you need to have tamper-proof, secure equipment that can provide 2 identical physical copies of the report which are ready once the assessment is over, which means a dual tape recorder or a dual CD burner, just like it was back in 2003. Both of those pieces of equipment are very expensive, up to £1,500 in some cases, which is especially difficult for disabled people trying to access benefits. Mobile phones and laptops are not permitted as recording devices because they're not seen as suitable equipment. It's perhaps of no surprise then that years into the rollout of PIP in Northern Ireland, the Department for Communities in the region has said that only 13 people have successfully recorded their assessment interviews the proper way. That seems a little unfair, surely. Well, more and more people are turning to covertly recording their assessment interviews and using those recordings to overturn benefits denials, because the reports produced are so completely at odds with the facts and what occurred in those assessments. For legal reasons, I can't recommend that you do this, but I can show you examples of where it's been useful. I'm winking. One such case is with Nev Cartwright in 2017, whose PIP report was littered with falsehoods and lies. Despite government protest, his tribunal judge permitted a transcript of the report to be submitted as evidence, and it was ultimately used to award his benefits. If the Department for Communities is still watching, rest assured that I would never, ever consider doing any of the things like that, and would definitely never procure an external hard drive just for those backups. This practice has also extended to other benefits too. Somewhat antagonistic disabled troublemaker Jonathan Hume broke the rules and leaked a recording of his own working capability assessment for ESA, another benefit many disabled people are entitled to. In this covert recording, he forced Maximus, the assessors contracted by the Department for Work and Pensions at the time, to admit that they were asking disabled people brutal and dangerous questions about their mental health, including coarse, intrusive questioning about suicide and self-harm. As disabled journalist and author of the fantastic book Crippled, Frances Ryan writes in The Guardian in 2018, of over 1 million cases of alleged benefit fraud between 2010 and 2015, 85% were completely without merit. Many thousands more were found to be false through investigation. Members of the public are encouraged, sometimes implicitly, sometimes explicitly, to report those they perceive as breaking the benefits rules. For someone like me, a wheelchair user who can walk short distances, that means that standing up to get an item from a high shelf, in a shop, rearranging my legs or my foot, can get stares and disapproving glares. I know that for myself, that often means going as far as changing how and what mobility aids I use to reduce the risks of such attitudes coming to the surface in others. For other disabled people, this translates into fraud investigations through anonymous tip-offs, and not uncommonly to their income being taken away. Fellow disabled creator Annie Eleni has a great YouTube video about spotting fake disabilities, which I encourage you all to watch. We're much more likely to be faking well than faking sick. As a society, we have an insatiable need to categorise disabled people as good disabled or bad disabled. If we get on with our lives, don't complain, don't claim benefits, and fit within the narrow categories of definitions that the public has for disabled people, we can be good disabled. If we're loud or rely on assistance or have the awful characteristics of having a human body with its accompanying complexity, we can be bad disabled. The outcomes of disability benefits cuts range from social isolation, worsening health, destitution and homelessness, and death by suicide. 650,000 disabled people in the UK were officially destitute in 2018, a number that's growing and increasingly attributed to disability issues. For context, that's roughly 1% of people, the whole population in the UK, 1% are destitute disabled people. That is incredible. And that's just for people who already have benefits in the first place. Those entering disability benefit systems for the first time often have enormous hurdles to jump, and waiting times can be long. Since 2013, over 17,000 people have died waiting for decisions to be made regarding their benefits applications. 17,000. There's another big impact on disabled people that comes from surveillance culture. Along with suspicions and accusations of fakery and sponging off the systems, comes a significant and steady increase in abuse, hate crime and violence against disabled people. In 2018 alone, figures from England and Wales showed a 33% increase in disabled hate crime over the previous year alone. The largest category of abuse reported in these figures was violence against the person, but the biggest increase was fraud and financial abuse, which increased over 1,000% over the previous year. So not only are people made financially insecure or destitute by reassessments, disabled people are becoming less safe, both in private from their families and carers and from the general public, because of the disabledist culture that society's spotlights on receivers of public funds has developed. In addition to all of this, the UK government has been found to be using biased methods to assess disability benefits for disabled people, and the benefits denials hit poorer areas and areas with more sick and disabled people the hardest. Despite all of this, it's difficult to uphold your own rights in PIP assessments at all. Earlier this year in Northern Ireland, local media reported that Capita had been cancelling multiple assessment appointments which were due to be monitored by independent human rights monitors at the request of disabled people. Curious? So we've seen that things can be pretty grim for disabled people claiming PIP. But how do we move beyond this? Well, we could look to the past. Disability benefits in the country haven't always been this punitive, and perhaps reverting to the old DLA or Disability Living Allowance system would be a good move in the short term. This would mean no more dehumanising reassessments for some people and a decrease in fraud by assessors. It would measurably improve the quality of life of disabled people right across social demographics. However, DLA was better, but it wasn't perfect. How we move beyond where we are now to somewhere ideal will depend on whether we look at the current benefit system that's in place as a whole. The UK likes to see itself as a bit of a global leader in disability rights, and that has been at different points, at various levels of being true and a massive porky pie. At the moment, the UN has directly called us out for being massively abusive to disabled people, so it's perhaps time to get off our high horses for a little bit. Disability benefits in the UK have always been hard fought and hard won, from forceful campaigns to deinstitutionalise by the independent living movement in the 70s and 80s, to disabled activists closing major bridges in London for protesting inaccessible transport in the 90s. It has always taken bravery, resolve and anger to change disability rights for the better in the UK. And we're not even standing still right now, we're rolling backwards every single day. Alongside benefits for disabled people being cut to ribbons, the National Health Service is being sold off piecemeal to the highest bidders by consecutive Conservative governments. A better disability benefit system is not going to be handed to us. The state of disability benefits in the UK is a result of a sweeping set of changes brought in by various neoliberal UK governments over the past decades to attempt to shrink public expenditure and to make work pay. The way disability and out-of-work benefits in the UK work is based in a threat model, where compliance to arbitrary requirements is enforced through the threat of destitution, removal of social care, and incarceration. It's useful to think of these benefits as a larger part of the programme to cut the welfare state to ribbons, rather than a standalone issue that can be solved within capitalism. PIP will never be compliant with human rights. PIP will never provide justice for disabled people. PIP will never be humane, and PIP will never be justifiable. It's an expensive human rights abuse that has ended up costing 20% more than the old system to run, despite being introduced to save costs. Yes, the financial toll is enormous, but more importantly, the human and civil rights of disabled people, our quality of life, and our lives themselves have suffered, been harmed, and been ended by PIP and the environment of suspicion around it. People dying of terminal illness have had their dignity and humanity ripped from them by fraudulent assessors claiming more in 2 days than they would in a month on benefits. Their final days were ones of dread and destitution rather than care and calm. Despite failing even basic standards of accountability and safeguarding, Capita, Atos and other contractors maintain contracts worth billions of pounds of public money, and they get away with ruining the lives of lots of my friends, as well as countless tens of thousands more disabled people across the UK. People will continue to suffer, people will continue to be evicted, people will continue to decline in health, and people will continue to die without a penny until the system is changed. There are ways to make sure that you're treated as fairly as possible within the current system, though. Disabled people who are applying for PIP have a right to bring advocates, to bring human rights monitors, and to bring friends to assessments, and a right to record those assessments. Do not give benefits assessors an inch. Do not give decision makers an inch. Do not give any part of the disability benefit system an inch, because the experience of hundreds of thousands of disabled people across the UK is that when given an inch, they'll take a mile. I was hoping that I'd be able to come up with a catchy and inspiring end to this video that would sum up what the problems are and where we need to go with this. But to be honest, I'm just so angry that I've been at a loss as to what to say. What I do know is that under a Conservative government intent on pushing Brexit through regardless of any consequences, it's going to be a turbulent time for folks like us. There's an election next week in the UK on the 12th of December, this Thursday. My ask is that you vote for disability rights, for human dignity, and for a compassionate social safety net. The following is my own opinion and not that of anyone I work for or with. Do not vote for the Tories. Do not vote for the Conservative Party. What I've talked about today is principally their fault, and most of it was introduced during the Conservative and Liberal Democrat governments from the 2010 government up until today. Vote Labour, vote Green, vote SNP, vote Plaid Cymru, vote Lib Dem even, if that will keep the Tories out of your local seat. I want disabled people to be believed, to be genuinely believed, to be supported, to be accommodated, and to be part of society in the fullest and most genuine way. I don't think that can happen with PIP in any form. PIP makes getting better a threat. We can do something about that this week. Let's go.
We're sorry for keeping you waiting. Please continue to hold. We will answer your call as soon as an advisor is available. Alternatively, for more information, please visit our website at www.nidirect.gov.uk.